So I got the idea of this video from the end of my last one, in which Jeranism implies that the southern polar vortex is disproof of the globe Earth. Now, I explained it, and explained that it would make even less sense on the flat Earth because it would have no force to push it in the circular direction that it goes. Without a rotation to the Earth, this wind should be a more north to south wind, or south to north wind in the North Pole. And the same sort of concepts go for ocean currents and undercurrents. But that got me thinking, are there any other excuses that flat earthers like to use that actually make less sense? The first thing that came to mind was obvious to me anyway, and that is gravity. There are a lot of problems with gravity as we know it on a flat Earth, since we would be pulled to the center of this disk. And if the flat Earth is considerably bigger than the globe Earth is thought to be, then that would mean much more gravity, potentially. Of course, most flat earthers don't believe in gravity as we've come to know it. Instead, most of them seem to believe that density or buoyancy replaces gravity or explains what we observe as gravity. And it makes sense, right? Denser things sink, less dense things float, and that's pretty much what we observe. Well, let's ask ourselves the bigger question. How does buoyancy work on a flat Earth? See, buoyancy is caused by a gradient of pressure. See, if we have, say, a ball underwater, the water that is below the ball has a higher pressure than the water above it, and that difference in pressure pushes the ball upwards. That's it. That's all buoyancy is. Now, yes, if the ball is denser than the water, then it will sink. But that's not because of buoyancy, that's because of gravity. That's because its weight is higher than the force of the pressure. So the force of the pressure is not enough to keep it afloat. So gravity takes over and sinks it. Buoyancy requires gravity to cause that gradient of pressure in the first place, and buoyancy only pushes things up. It does not pull things down, so you still need that downward force from somewhere else. How then can buoyancy replace gravity? You see, flat earthers sometimes accuse us globe believers of magical thinking when it comes to gravity, but the irony is that's exactly what they're doing with buoyancy. Another thing to consider is the orbit of the sun and moon. Now, the common explanation that I hear is that we have a moon and spotlight sun circling above us, much closer than we would think. Now, that would put those things in the sky, but our perspective on the Earth would have a totally different trajectory, and it would cause a change in angular size throughout the day, which we don't observe. And this is ironically dismissed with perspective, which has become a vague, inadequately explained buzzword with these guys. But besides that, here's the bigger question. How? How do these things not only stay up in the sky without crashing down, but what keeps them revolving in the circle? Because there has to be some sort of centripetal force, something to keep them from flying off in one direction, something to keep them in that circular motion. We need a force for that. And Lord knows it can't be gravity. So what is it? So is it reasonable to assume that there is this force, yet unobserved, undetected, and unexplained, keeping heavenly bodies circling above us, just somehow? Are we going to ignore this huge hole in the flat Earth hypothesis? What's even worse are the planets with their crazy curved movements across the sky. And they even have their own phases. These hardly have an explanation on the flat Earth, but they are explained perfectly and point to a heliocentric globe Earth. Next up, the moon landings and space probe imagery in general. Totally fake, right? Well, there's lots of problems with that assertion, but let's ask ourselves the bigger question. Why? Why would a government establish a space agency and spend money on it just to have them fake everything? What would that accomplish? What could that accomplish? I've heard it along these lines.
It's a giant game of chess. We, all of us in humanity, are the pawns. Part of the whole flat earth thing is keeping us locked down, not knowledgeable about who we really are as people and what we're capable of.
Which makes no sense. They're not keeping us in check by lying to us about things that we could observe ourselves from the ground with decent enough equipment. It's not like giving us the wrong idea of the shape of the earth is what's keeping us eating out of the government's hand. It's not like this keeps us a slave to the man because we have the wrong idea of the planet that we're on. It doesn't connect at all. These sorts of mind games don't make sense. You think the government just says, hey, we're going to educate them about something that isn't true. That way they will be slaves to us and they will never be able to find out anything about the nefarious conspiracies that we have. No, that doesn't make any sense. What? I've also heard it said that space agencies and their governments genuinely do believe in a round Earth, but they fake all of their stuff to make it seem like they have more technology than they really have. But again, bigger question, why? Why would they do that? With all of the effort and expertise that it would take to fake all of this stuff and make it look as genuine as it does, especially with the technology they had in the 60s, it would be much cheaper and much easier to have genuinely developed the technologies. The only other thing that I can think of is to hide whatever is in or beyond Antarctica. But even then, it would be much easier and much more efficient to just send troops to patrol Antarctica. It's not going to take a whole grand conspiracy to do that. And the International Space Station, which you can actually see with the naked eye for yourself. It's easier to see at night, though. Now, this kind of ties in with the last 2 points that I made. What's keeping it up there? And how could they possibly fake that? Not to mention all of the other things that rely on satellites, like GPS and weather prediction. Now, if NASA, part of the US government, was faking stuff, then they're part of a conspiracy, right? But wait, we have similar imagery from, say, Russia, Japan, India, China, and all of the countries that are a part of the European Space Agency. Is it reasonable to think that all of these governments are part of this grand conspiracy? And for what reason? See, the flat earth hypotheses are mostly about only believing what is evidenced by what you can personally observe, unless you observe something to the contrary, but I digress. But sometimes it's less reasonable to doubt something when you stop, take a step back, take a look at the bigger picture and ask bigger questions. Because, doubting something can have much bigger implications that just don't have an explanation. So, some things are just better able to explain reality than conspiracy theories.